Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be bringing you my February TBR. So I never actually put out a January TBR because I tend to at the beginning of the year just focus on my various yearly TBRs, but February we've got a bit of a plan, a bit of a structure, and I'm going to be talking about it here today. So the first two books are books that I've technically already started, but I know for definite will be carrying on into the month of February, so we're going to talk about those first. The first one of them is a big chunky boy that you're going to be seeing on a good couple of TBRs for the next few months, and that is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This was on my classics TBR for the year, and I said I was going to be doing a buddy read of it with a friend from work for the first quarter of the year. We have actually started it. We are both going for the same audiobook as a way of consuming this particular story. It's the one that's on Audible, narrated by, is it Thandie Newton? I'll link it down below. So far, really enjoying it. I'm about 10% of the way through. We've had a little bit of peace, now we are at war. The general vibes is it's enjoyable, but it is hella long, which I know is a bit of an understatement given how chunky the book obviously is, but it just feels like every scene could definitely have at least a third of it kind of cut out and it would have functioned in the same way. But really enjoying the cast of characters. We are also watching the BBC adaptation miniseries from 2016 kind of as we read along with it, and that's really helping to keep all the characters straight and put some faces to some names. So enjoyable, gonna be a while, clearly not finishing it in the final week of January, definitely be drifting on to mid-April. Then another one that was on my classics TBR that I'm going to be carrying on in February is Watership Down by Richard Adams. This is a story about a warren of rabbits, and one of them, Fievel, basically has premonitions. Is kind of based on the idea of Cassandra from Greek mythology, and Hazel, who is his best friend, listens to him and they try and move away because the warren's going to get destroyed in some way. It's about their adventures trying to come across a land that is going to be safe for them. It's really beautiful. I'm about 20% of the way through. It is absolutely harrowing and hella traumatic in places. I cannot believe that this was originally written for children. The reason why I think it's going to take me quite a long time is, even though it's chunky but it's not crazy, is because I'm also listening to this one in audiobook because Peter Capaldi narrates it, and he is just stunning with all of his character work. I'm really enjoying it in audiobook form. So I could sit down and smash this book out in a week and probably get it done in January, but I'd rather continue listening to it with the audiobook. But given I'm also doing War and Peace and kind of running them simultaneously, and they're both very long, one of them noticeably shorter than the other, but it's still going to take me a little while to get through them. But I'm enjoying not feeling like I need to rush my reading this month. Given how chaotic December was trying to do my 30 books in 30 days challenge, I think it's okay to take my time and really enjoy the books that I'm reading. So those are the two that are going to be carrying on from January into the month of February. But what am I going to be reading that's going to be new in February? Well, the Napoleonic Wars are a major part of War and Peace, and I realise as I'm reading them and sort of watching the miniseries, it's an area of history that I don't know much about, so I thought this would be a really good opportunity to focus in on a bit of a French theme for at least a couple of the books for February. One of those is France, A History from Gaul to de Gaulle by Julius Norwich. This is, as the title suggests, just a brief history of France, going back to quite an old time to all the way towards more modern day stuff. Obviously the Napoleonic Wars are going to feature in this, and I thought this would be a really good grounding to read alongside, and it is part of my Around the World in 12 Non-Fiction TBR, so it'd be good to tick this bad boy off. So looking forward to this one. Let's improve that knowledge. And then one that I kind of forgotten was on my shelf and I haven't actually got around to picking up in absolute years is Naomi Novik's book 1 in the Temeraire series, which is also known as His Majesty's Dragon. This is a historical fantasy as if the Napoleonic Wars had dragons as part of their air force, and I thought what better time to read it than in the month where I'm learning about the Napoleonic Wars in a non-fiction context, reading about them in a historical context in a non-fantasy setting, and then a lovely counterfactual what if we had dragons setting. This one's a lot shorter and I think will be really good fun, and Naomi Novik is a big name fantasy author that I have yet to read anything from, and I've been meaning to for a really long time, so it'll be fun to sink my teeth into a new series. And also, who doesn't love dragons? So that's my little French slant that we're doing for the month of February, but not all the books have a France theme. One of them I'm going to be buddy reading with a different person from work, Belle, who we are doing non-fiction buddy reads at the moment. We've currently got Sentient on the go and it's fantastic. More of that in my wrap up to come. But we've decided to pick for our February pick Weapons of Mass Destruction, How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy by Cathay O'Neill. This is a look at how we use mathematics to sort of encode data to gather data, but then also how we can build inequalities into this, because even though maths is supposed to be relatively objective, people are still building the systems. Now, there's a couple of mixed reviews on here from people whose opinions I really respect, so I'm intrigued to see how this goes. but I have enjoyed a lot of the mathsy books I've been reading recently, and like I've said in a few other videos, I'm trying to lean away from quite such hardcore biology stuff and going more towards physics, maths, chemistry, and kind of branching out my non-fiction science away from just squishy icky things. And I do like it when we get a bit of an intersection between kind of social justice issues and more objective stuff like mathematics. So I think this is going to be really interesting. I'm also going to be taking off a few other things from my yearly TBRs. One of those is going to be Long Division by Kiese Laymon. I read Kiese Laymon's autobiography slash memoir called Heavy. Really loved it. This is his fiction, and it's like two separate stories where the book like flips. It's supposed to be really fun and cool and quirky, and it's something to do with like there's a kind of dual timeline thing going on, and there's some kind of like disappearance and some weird main character. I'm not too sure basically. I really liked Kiese Laymon's writing style in Heavy, and I think that this whole kind of gimmick is quite fun. I've read a few books that have done this before and they've always been quite entertaining, so I think this one will be a good to get to, and it is quite short, which again, compared to some of these chunky classics, will be a bit of a like refresher for me. I said I'm trying to stay away from the biology, but that's an absolute lie, because of course there's a biology book on this list, and that is Planta Sapiens, Unmasking Plant Intelligence by Paco, Calvo. This is really, as it says on the tin, a look at plants and a new perspective on plant biology and cognitive science and how plants talk to each other. It's an idea I've stumbled across in other books, especially when we're looking at things like fungi and mycelia and like interconnected networks and how they work. So I'm really intrigued to check out the less mobile, slightly less squishy version of biology over here, and to see just a whole new world that I don't really know anything about. So psyched for this one. It is a 5-star predictions pick, so no pressure book. Straying away from non-fiction back into the world of fiction, I've got the book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Ellison on my list. This is a book I've had on my TBR for freaking years now. I want to say 4 or 5 years, and it is about a dystopian world, or like a post-apocalyptic world I guess technically, where some kind of fever means that childbirth is incredibly dangerous for women. It borderline might as well be historical fiction for that reason, because childbirth has been historically very bad for women. It is about an unnamed midwife who is travelling across the world to try and help people with giving birth, and it's sort of about the trials and tribulations that she comes across. It is book 1 of a series. I don't know if I'm going to continue the series, but I thought it'd be good fun. I've not read anything post-apocalyptic in a long time, other than a couple of rereads last year. So I'm intrigued to stumble back into a genre that I've kind of been ignoring for a while. So psyched about that bad boy. I then also want to get to John Wyndham's Plan for Chaos. This was an unpublished book of his. He's like a sci-fi author from kind of around the 50s. And this, he's the guy who wrote The Day of the Triffids, is probably the one that you know him most from. This is about a series of identical women who are found dead in suspicious circumstances, and then it might be linked to cloning and Nazism. I know, very dramatic, very exciting. Like I said, this was an like unpublished manuscript that was published after John Wyndham died. I'm really intrigued and excited by it. I've read a huge amount of his back catalogue. I will link a video here somewhere for like an author in the spotlight video that I've done on him, and this is one of the few that I have left to get to. I was going to try and get to it in December for my 30 books in 30 days. Didn't quite get there, so I thought I'd try and prioritise it now. And then I've been wanting to get into a little bit more horror, and I have a YA horror book that I picked up super spare at the moment called The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. It's about a 12-year-old boy who mourns the death of his mother up in an attic with only books for his company, but those books suck him into some kind of fantasy world. It's very much like a Portal fantasy kind of vibe. I think this is going to be really interesting, and I'm looking, I want to read just more spooky stuff, and I thought, let's see what I've got on my shelf, and I fancy something a little bit more light-hearted in terms of like I guess easy reading rather than light-hearted. It's probably not going to be that light-hearted. His mother dies very early on in it, but you know what I mean, like a bit of an easier read, a YA kind of style book compared to some of the slightly denser stuff we've got going on. I've got some fairly thick non-fiction books and fairly intense classics going on, so I thought this would be a nice little palette cleanser and a way to kind of dip my toe into a little bit more of the horror vibe that I have said that I do want to read more of from my bookshelves. Then continuing with sort of the classics vibe, we also have Another Country by James Baldwin. This is on my classics TBR as well. It's probably my lowest priority of the whole list, which is why I've mentioned it towards the end, but I am intending to get to it at some point this year. And this is a story of desire, hatred and violence set in New York with the Harlem jazz scene. James Baldwin has a gorgeous writing style. I read his book Giovanni's Room a couple of years ago and absolutely adored it, hence why I want to get to more of his. He also has some fairly big name non-fiction that I do need need to eventually get to, but I really wanted to focus on a little bit more of a historical fiction, and the jazz scene is such a fun time period to read about, so I'm excited for this one. But like I say, if I don't get to it, it might just be like a drift over into March. Okay, and those are all the books that I'm trying to get to in February. I'll see how I do. January has been a very slow start to the year. Everything has been very good reading, very peak high quality, but our quantity has been very reduced. I'm quite far behind on my Goodreads goals already, so I might need to up the pace up a little bit back in February. But there have been some chunky boys that have been taking a lot of time and attention away. So let me know what you think to any of these books. Have you read any of them? Do you think I should abandon any of them before we even start? That Weapons of Mass Destruction, side-eyeing it a little bit. Some very dodgy reviews out there, but you never know. And I hope you're having a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.